Hi, my name is Robert Beach, and welcome to the Pro segment of Bodybagging Entertainment Xtreme Haunt FX DVD. I'm going to be showing you today how to make a life mask and how to take that life mask and make foam latex appliances with it. So let's get started. Today we will be assisted with our victim here, Derek, and my lovely assistant, Adelie, over here. And first thing we do is we check and see, well, we're going to have to use a ball cap on this person here. Depending upon the ball cap and the shape of the person's head, you may not even need to glue it down. Okay, right now we're using a little bit of prostate adhesive to stick down the edges. You try to get as many of the wrinkles out of here as possible, because you're going to have to be grinding them off after the fact, so it's easier to do it now. To protect the eyebrows, we can just stick them right down to the skin. Now to protect the wearer, we'll drape up here. Okay, now you're going to need to work out some kind of a system with your person who's going to be going under the plaster, saying, "Are you okay? Yes, no." So thumbs up, thumbs down is good. Show them. Are you okay? All right. What we're going to be casting in today is a product called Alginate. If you're still interested in doing some of this after watching this video, I recommend this book here, and I don't know if it's in frame or not. Okay, this is Techniques of Three-Dimensional Makeup by Lee Bacon. It's a fairly old book. It's goes in and out of print occasionally. Some of it's very obsolete, but this is still the best book on mold making and prosthetic sculpting and creation. So I recommend that one. Now the objective when we're doing a life mask here, have the model under the plaster for as short of a period of time as possible. So that's why I always recommend that you have an assistant and you have things set up ahead of time. The alginate I'm using today is called AccuCast. It's available from several vendors out there. This is the green brand. They come in a couple of different speeds. You want to stay away from using dental alginate. Dental alginate sets up much too fast for doing a life mask, and some of it has flavors in it that might irritate the person's skin. The AccuCast and other brands that are made specifically for body molds, light casting are recommended. So I'm going to show you a couple ways to not do it first. This is about lukewarm water. It feels slightly cool to the touch. That's about where you want to have it. You don't want to have it too hot or too cold. Too cold, it will adversely affect the model. Too hot, it'll set up too fast. So again, it's kind of a question of experience with it. So I'm going to mix the alginate to the water. Always mix the solid to the liquid, not the other way around, regardless of whatever you're doing. Now we want to let this run quite a bit to eliminate all the clumps. So we end up with a viscous liquid. This is going to be too thin for our purposes. Close your eyes there. We're going to do this a couple times. You put this onto the face. Now if it's too thin, it will tend to leave thin spots. If it's too watery, it'll drip right down off the face, and you're going to be constantly going back up and over to get it to stick, and that's not what we want. Now, if your alginate is too thick, it'll leave kind of lumps, and it'll leave air bubbles in there. Notice it doesn't come off of the face, but it's hard to work with, and won't yield a good cast. Point to consider: alginate versus plaster. we do not make life masks. We do not cast models' faces with plaster. We do not cast models' faces with plaster bandages. You always need to use alginate. There is no way to make it safe enough to cast plaster or a plaster-based product directly on the face. Use alginate. Inevitably, when you're doing a life mask, you're going to get asked, or someone's going to make the requirement of, say, what if the person has facial hair? What do you do? If the person has just a little bit of facial hair, you can sometimes use the glue stick, same way you would use on the eyebrows. Tack it down. If the person has a full beard, you gotta question, why is the person getting a life mask anyway? Because you can't put a prosthetic over a full beard. You can cover the beard with a plastic bag or gelatin. You can mix up some unflavored gelatin and spread it into the beard, and that will protect the beard. You'll get this cast of the person's face, and there will be this big lump on the bottom of their face. As a last resort, you can use Vaseline. Okay, when we're doing this for real, we have our water, which is about at 80 degrees, should give us about 6 minutes of working time. Again, pour the dry material into the water and mix. Now what we're going to be doing is starting from the top. Here, why don't you make yourself useful here, Mr. Victim. Starting at the top, this is about the consistency you want. It'll slowly drip down. Start at the top of the head and work your way down. That's a little on the thin side, but that's okay. Now if you look up here, zoom in a little bit. Hold on a second. What you're going to have problems with usually is right here in the corner of the eye. So you want to press gently into the corner of the eye to eliminate any air bubbles. Well, we'll see if your sight is as good as mine. And don't be in too much of a hurry with this. You have about 6 minutes if you timed it out just right. I see you have an air bubble right in there. You need to fill that in. And occasionally it'll drip a little bit. Just pick it right off the bottom of the neck and bring it out. This is a messy process, and don't worry too much about it. Now, question comes up is, what do we do about the nose? Do you use straws? No, we don't use straws. Save the nostrils for very last. And just kind of work your way around the nose, and slowly, as the stuff starts to set up, you'll cover the tip of the nose and the nostrils. You're not going to have a prosthetic that's going to fit directly into the nostrils anyway, so if it's not perfect around the nostrils, that's okay. Safety is most important. I used to do this by having the actor taking a deep breath, holding it, cover the nostrils, and then exhaling forcefully. Don't do that anymore. It's a little too dangerous. But just something like this, and keep your eyes, have your assistant keep your eyes on those nostrils. Make sure they don't get covered up. Yes, we know. Breathing is a fun thing to have. And now we're losing some of it. Bring some of this back up to the top. Have a thin spot right here. See that? Cover that right up. Keeping the nostrils clear. Now, once the alginate gets on the model's warm face, it'll start to set up a little faster. Okay. Exhale forcefully. Good. Got a little bit covered in there. Alright. Okay, we're starting to set up here. We take some cotton balls, roll cotton would work. and we'll dab a little bit of this cotton into and around the alginate. Now, what this does is it will form a physical bond between the alginate and the plaster bandages that are going to go on over this to hold the mask's shape. Now you have to put this cotton on before the thing gets completely set up. So that some of the fibers will embed themselves into the alginate. That's what we want to do. Okay. At this stage, the alginate is starting to set up. You don't want to make jokes. You don't want to say something funny, and because if the person smiles, they'll ruin the cast and you have to start all over again. Another thing, some people are claustrophobic. Most of us are claustrophobic. He can't see anything, all he can do is hear. So it's always good if you have an assistant, or if you need to go over and do something, keep a hand on him or her, and say, we're still here, you are not all alone in the universe. The alginate by itself takes a nice cast of the model's face. However, it will not hold its shape once it is off the model's face. We end up with a rubbery like substance like this. Picks up detail but doesn't hold its shape. So to get something to hold its shape, we use plaster bandages. Now, whereas the water for the alginate needs to be lukewarm, the water that used to activate the plaster bandages needs to be hot. Hot as it comes out of the tap. So now we have nice and hot water that will make the plaster bandages malleable, so they'll adhere to the person's face. On top of that, we will add a little bit of a pinch or so of regular table salt to the water. That further makes the plaster bandages set up even faster, which again, speed is important here. You want to keep the model under the alginate and plaster bandages for as short of a time as possible. Proper way to use the plaster bandages: fold these in half, dunk them in the hot water, give it a little bit of a rinse, wring it out a little bit, still kind of wet, and we apply it to the face. Now, it's important on this very first layer here that you rub these plaster bandages into every little nook and cranny on the alginate. Because if you don't do that, you're going to end up with an air bubble or an empty space, which will cause an abnormality on the final finished positive. And overlap the plaster bandages, and again, rub them in. Makes for a stronger mask. Now, for the tip bridge of the nose, we'll fold that over a couple times to make a tube, and just form that right over the tip of the nose. Make it nice and thick down there, because that's where it's going to need to be strong. Now, there really isn't much else to do except sit around and watch plaster dry. Connect. Now, chances are that the alginate will stick to the rubber ball cap, so we'll take the rubber ball cap off at the same time. We'll start by getting this up and off to the side. Bend over at the waist, model, and start puffing your cheeks, wrinkle your brow, and so we'll just ease this off. Keep your eyes closed, and presto, and he lives. And over here we have our negative, which turned out pretty good, I think, this time. Casting the positive has to happen within an hour or two after taking the impression. If you have to wait until maybe the next day, your best bet would be to take some damp paper towels, put them in here, and put it in a plastic bag and wait till the following day. It is also very important to dry the inside of the mask, because that will interfere with the curing of the plaster we'll be using to make the positive. We're going to be casting the positive out of a product called UltraCal 30. We will build up the life mask in layers. We're going to be using warm water for this, just a little bit, maybe a ½ inch or so. There are specific measurements to make for getting the proper consistency. Now, the first layer we add to the life mask is called the detail coat. It is, as you might suspect, the most important layer. Now, as soon as this sets up, we'll start a second layer, and then a third on top of that. 3 or 4 layers is about all you really need. So now we will let that sit and let the first layer set up thoroughly before we add the next layers. Like I said, the first layer, the detail layer, is the most important one. So we want to wait for it to set up so additional layers we add on top of this won't disturb it, mess it up, cause air bubbles, any number of things that can go wrong. So sit around and we wait. Okay, we're pretty much set up here. I can press on that, and you know it's congealed a little bit. You want to add the next layer at about this time. You don't want to wait for it to get completely hard, because then there'll be a problem with the 2 layers sticking to each other. So we'll build this up to a thickness of approximately 1/4 to a ½ inch. It'll tend to pool down at the bottom. Just bring it up to the sides. Don't worry about getting the bottom extra thick. It'll take care of itself. You need to make sure that the sides up here are going to be thick enough. And that's our second layer. Ta-da. Now the second layer has congealed to the point where we can add the next and final layer. Now, because this is going into the oven, we'll be reinforcing the whole life mask with burlap. Wet it down. Get some good adhesion between this layer and the next. And press it into the inside. The burlap will reinforce the plasters. Now by this time, the first layer that we put on is pretty much getting solidified, so we can push a little bit of the burlap into it and not worry about anything cracking or breaking. But that is about all that we need, right? I thought now we just sit around and watch plaster dry. We're pretty much set up here. I can still carve it with my fingernail, so it's not completely set up yet. You'll notice it will start to get warm. It's slightly warm now. It'll become steaming by the time as it goes through its heat cycle. So this is ready to get taken off. That's what we end up with, and from there we can use this to make our, we start casting or sculpting our clay on this to produce our prosthetic. Normally it's good if you wait a couple of days for all the water to evaporate from the inside of the mold before you start doing that. So, and we're ready to go. The end.